G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to have a look at one of the weirdest planes in the entire game. Perhaps one of the most interesting as well. The Canberra Mark 6, also known as the Cannon Bearer, also known as the Meme Bearer. Any other names? Put them in the comments. I've heard the Cranberry as well, a couple of other strange ones, but that's not the point of the video. Today, what we're going to be discussing is the role of bombers in ARB. Yes, that's right. We're going to address the bomber question. Now, let me start this video by saying that I actually enjoy playing ground attack aircraft and faster aircraft that can perhaps play a role in the battle, and the Canberra is one of them. For me personally, I don't see the Canberra Mark 6 as a strategic bomber. I see it more as an attack bomber, or a frontline bomber, for that matter. And bombers like the Dornier 217s, the B-25 even, I personally don't see them as an attack, as a long-range heavy bomber, or as a strategic bomber. I see them more as a frontline bomber. And that's where their role sort of shines, because you can actually use their front-facing guns. With the Dornier 217s, there are some that basically have like one MG151 forward-facing controlled by the pilot, but the gem of the Dornier 217s is that they're fast. And you see me use them in Tank RB. If you ever come across me in Tank RB between the battle ratings of something like about 4.7 to 7.7 or 6.7, where the Arado comes in, you'll see me using the Dornier 217, and it's because I really, really enjoy it. But we're going to be talking about the long-range strategic bombers. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of them. It's not terribly rewarding gameplay. It's not terribly interesting gameplay. And for this particular gameplay that I thought, or the gameplay that I thought to have running in the background while I discussed this, my mind immediately went to the attack bombers, the fast ones, the maneuverable ones, and simply because they're more engaging, they're more interesting, they're more fun to me. What do I actually think? First of all, we're going to start on my personal opinion on how bombers function in War Thunder. Right now, apart from a couple of maps that I've already discussed, they're pretty much useless. They're not really good for anything. They don't really do much. They can gunship, I guess. They can camp in space, I guess. In a couple of maps, they can heavily influence the tickets, whilst at some BRs, you actually can't climb up to them. Battle ratings like even 4.3, you actually have to have a dedicated group of people going to intercept bombers. Personally, I think the best solution for bombers would be just to stick them in enduring conflict. Now, in enduring confrontation, you've got a couple of things, right? A couple of problems here. I noticed a lot of people in the video that I made about maps were discussing bombers, and that was perhaps where the major piece of contention came from. Now, I don't think bombers should be completely removed from the game. I don't think bombers should be changed in their flight model or damage model. I think they should be given a different game mode. I think ARB should be the game mode which is centered around dogfights and centered around perhaps intercepting, attacking, ground attack stuff, basically. Where we have stuff like the Su-25T, the A-10 Warthog at rank 6, and other things like the Me-410, the IL-2s, the A-26, AD-4s at props, basically, and at lower tiers. That's personally what I think should happen, whereas the strategic bombers should be reserved for enduring conflict, and enduring conflict should be a thing that is consistent. You always have one running, and you always have them in-game. So if someone needs to make a shitload of Silver Lions, they go to enduring conflict, where they can spend up to an hour and a half, however long they want. I've actually spent 4 hours in a single enduring conflict match. It was extremely boring because I was just chasing AI, but that's the thing. You can make it interesting for bomber pilots who can actually rack up a couple of AI kills and not have to constantly get destroyed by interceptors. Whereas in ARB, they will constantly get destroyed, and it's just not going to be fun. And trust me, I know I've played loads of B-17s. In fact, when I got into this game, one of the things that attracted me was the B-17. And one of my mates, short story, I got into flying in War Thunder from a mate of mine who taught me how to fly radio-controlled planes. And one of our mates had a really big, beautiful B-17. It was gorgeous, like 1.8 meter wingspan. It was made of like a special foam. It was electric powered, and it was just it was so smooth, so beautiful, and I absolutely adored the thing. And the plane itself, whilst in real life was legendary of status, most people were lucky to see 25 missions, and it's not terribly durable, whilst being called the Flying Fortress, and whilst also having occasions where they would take monstrous amounts of damage. If you face a Bf-109 G2 with gun pods, you're probably not going to make it out alive, simply because the Mini-Geschoss shells were extremely powerful. I'm not really here to debate specifics, but let's just say in War Thunder, I'm pretty sure they've got it modeled okay, and I don't want that changed. What I would rather happen is that the game changes around the current statistics and flight models so that we have something that's enjoyable for everyone. I think having the attack bombers and the frontline bombers still in RB, random battles, simply because they're fast and because they're maneuverable and they have forward-facing guns, I think that's okay. I think we can keep stuff like the 217s, the Arados, the B-57s, the IL-28s in these matchmakers. But I think bombers like the PE-8, bombers like the B-17, B-29, bombers like the some of the heavy French bombers, I think they would be better in enduring conflict fighting AI targets, for example, because enduring conflict just seems to be the place where you have a lot of empty matches. Maybe you've got like 2 rooms or 1 room for every server. And what we can do is we can have... you can see in the changelogs every patch, enduring conflict is coming a long way. And there's always room for, something interesting in EC. So what we can do, for example, is have bombers where every player vehicle is, say, escorted by 3 other bombers. So you've got a flight of 4, and maybe you've got some escort fighters. The enemy has, say it's Ruhr. The enemy has Bf-109 G10s with gun pods. And they'll come and make some passes on your flight of B-17s. And you're in one of them. And they'll follow... everyone sort of follows the lead, the player. I think it would be both immersive, interesting, rewarding, and fun for bomber pilots to have something like this in their matches, rather than them flying in a straight line, getting either intercepted or going to space. I don't think that's fun at all for anyone, and I think this solution is much more important. It's much more immersive, it's better in every way that I can think of. Let me know in the comments what everyone thinks, because I want to start a little discussion on this. Let's make bombers great again. I think bombers are quite a draw to the game for most people, especially the pilots, of course. Bombers tend to be of some sort of legendary status, where you see pictures of hundreds of them in the sky, and there are missions where they put 1,000 B-17s up. Now, I'm told that the survival rate over the war was extremely low for B-17s, but still, the way to make it fun is to improve the enemies that are facing these bombers. And I think by having them as AI targets rather than people who are actually like shooting, adjusting, aiming for weak spots on bombers. So, for example, the engines, the wings, the gunners, the pilot. Have AI targets that are a little bit dumb and they go for a general area, say. So they're less likely to do critical damage. Maybe they're armed with default rounds. compared to air targets or stealth belts, which I run. Maybe they don't have the 30 mils. Maybe they have 20 mils instead on planes like the G6, where you can actually outfit them. So they're harder to lead. They're easier to I guess, move out of the way of. There are so many things that we can actually do to make bombers interesting, and at the same time, make fighters and attackers in ARB more valuable overall, and to not clog the matchmaker up with terrible jets and terrible planes in general. One of the problems that we used to have when there was no limit on the number of bombers in RB was we would have an entire team of B-17s, and a single ME-410 or a single BF-109G2 or a Dora or something like that would just go and intercept them all. Get a nice little ace out of bombers. They'd have escort fighters trailing them at 5k at low altitude, low speed. Nothing they could do. Absolutely nothing that they could do. And it was just miserable for Allied teams. They would constantly lose because of bomber spam. And if you go back into videos from 2014 and 2015, you'll actually see that happening. Even in Air AB arcade battles. I'm told, I don't really play arcade, but I'm told that there is a big issue with bomber spam. And one of the ways that we could fix that is leave it to enduring conflict, where there are fewer player-controlled vehicles, there's more of a creative license, the matches are longer, and so you can actually climb to altitudes, you can actually have different mechanics that aren't completely unrealistic. One of the things that has been suggested over time, it was actually suggested by a very old War Thunder YouTuber called Mags TV. He proposed in his video a couple years back for fixes for bombers was to have a little zone on the map where bombers could rearm mid-air. And it wouldn't sort of do it like arcade where it gives you a timer and you just keep flying around until that timer expires, but you would actually fade out and then fade back in after, say, 15 seconds with a completely quote-unquote new vehicle to simulate bombers moving in and out of an area like they did in real life. And I think that's kind of cool. That's a really, really good suggestion. And it's a shame that it hasn't been carried over to enduring conflict. Maybe if this doesn't get implemented, or if this idea doesn't come forward, it could be because we're going to see something like this in World War mode, which would be nice. But for now, I think having such a thing in EC and having perhaps lobbies where you can play almost all of your bombers, I think that would be ideal, personally. Because right now, bombers really don't have a place in ARB, and it can be extremely tough for them. I understand that. And at the same time, on the flip side, fighters are trying to deal with other enemy fighters, trying to get their altitude advantage, their energy advantage, conserve their ammunition, and here they are, having to intercept bombers that, just by pressing a spacebar and flying forward, are pretty much winning matches without any sort of level of incredible skill whatsoever. I think that these solutions that I've put forth are quite viable. They're quite doable. They're simple to implement. You have, just like in Sim, you have constantly running enduring conflict matches. One for high tier, one for low tier, and you have a couple going at the same time. So maybe you've got one for the Russians and Japanese. Maybe you've got one for, I don't know, the Russians and Germans. And on that day, you can only play, so say, Russians and Germans, or Pacific campaign, or something like that, and it switches every, say, 12 hours, or every 6 hours, or whatever you want. And so, if it's the weekend to play America, you see everyone dumping in their B-17s, everyone in their B-29s on, say, Iwo Jima, and everyone has a fun time. I think it's really, really doable, and I think it's ultimately the one thing that can make ARB a really, really good game mode for fighters, and can improve the life and the quality of life of bomber pilots. Anyway, ladies and gents, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I really want to know what you think. We are starting on this channel, I think, to produce some good conversations. Some interesting ones, some that sort of get the almonds activated. we can really sort of perhaps stimulate some conversation, and that can carry over to Discord servers, Reddit, forums, TeamSpeak, if anyone still uses that anymore. Ugh, yuck. Anyway, point aside, I think we can really stimulate some conversation here. And I think that maybe I've got a point. And perhaps people can improve on this. Perhaps we can take a base idea and work on it. I think we're onto something here. And I really want to continue this and perhaps pass it on to developers, pass it on to suggestions, forums, and generally and genuinely get something happening. Because this will be really, really good for everyone. There is no one who loses here. Absolutely no one. And I think that's worth having a shot at. Anyway, ladies and gents, take care, and I'll catch you next time.